Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the previous class, we discussed about the dividends and its forms. Today, we are going to start the next chapter, that is lease and its types. What is a lease? A contract under which one party lessor, who is the owner of the asset, an asset, agrees to grant use of that asset to another party called the lessee in exchange for some periodical rental payments. Basically, lease is a contract. In this contract, there are two parties involved. Suppose there is a piece of land and Mr. A is the owner of this piece of land. Now there is Mr. B who wants to use this land. He wants to make a petrol pump. On this land. Now Mr. B is telling Mr. A that I will use your land for 50 years and for every year I will pay you 100,000 120,000 Afghanis. Now one party is the owner. This is the owner, Mr. A. And Mr. B is the user who is using that land. Now this Mr. A owner, is called lessor. And this Mr. B user, it is called the lessee. So lease is an agreement in which one party, lessor, allows the other party, lessee, to use its asset for periodical payments. This 1,20,000, this will be the periodic payment. So this type of agreement is called lease. A contract under which one party, lessor, who is the owner of an asset, agrees to grant use of that asset to another party, lessee, in exchange for some periodical rental payments. But here is a point. The point is that rent is also the same. Lease and rent. So what is the difference between these two? Basically, lease is for a long period of time. More than 1 year. And rent is for a short period of time. Another difference is in rent, the cancellation time period, it is short. Like suppose if I'm renting a house, so if owner wants to cancel the contract within 1 month, he will give me time that you have 1 month time, and within 1 month you will leave my house. But in case of lease, the penalty is very high. Here the penalty is less, but here the penalty is what? High. I can't cancel the contract. Lessor or lessee, they can't cancel the contract. If they will cancel the contract, it will cost them too much. Characteristics of lease. Ownership do not transfer, but asset can be used. In lease, ownership of asset is not transferring. Just the lessee is allowed to use the asset. Periodic payment is known as lease rent. The periodic payment that the lessee is paying to the lessor is called lease rent, treating as revenue expense. And for lessee, it will be revenue expense. Asset can be movable and immovable as well. The asset that the lessee is using, it will be either movable asset or it will be immovable asset. Movable asset, it can be machine, it can be different other things. And for immovable assets, it can be land or it can be building. Sometime in an agreement, a lessee can buy and own lease asset at the end of contract, else it will be returned. There is a type of lease in which the lessee can buy and own lease asset at the end of contract. Like if you will take the example of car financing by bank. Car financing is also a lease agreement. Suppose there is a car and bank, the model is old. The bank offers the customer that select any car in the market. The person is going, the customer is going, he is purchasing a car, $15,000. Now bank will make this payment. Bank will make this payment of $15,000. But the ownership documents of the car, it will be with the bank. Now the customer, he will make periodic payments to the bank. Suppose monthly he is paying $300. So he will complete this $15,000 payment plus $1,500 interest. So 15 plus 1,500, it will be 16,500. So in installments, the customer will make these 16,500 payment, and when the payments are complete, bank will transfer the ownership to the customer. Now here he's talking about this thing. Sometime in an agreement, lessee can buy and own lease asset. He's buying the asset and he's using the car at the end of the contract. The car belongs to the customer, else it will be returned, and it will not be returned. The car will not be returned. If a price of an asset is continuously increasing, because of inflation, still periodic payment will not change. This is another difference between rent and lease. If the prices are increasing in the market because of inflation, still lease payments will not increase. But rent, there is possibility that the owner is coming to you that after this month I will increase the rent by 2000 or by 3000. So he can increase the rent at any time. But in case of lease, there is no possibility of this thing. We agreed on this amount. So for lifetime of the lease, I will pay this. I will make this payment to you. So these are the characteristics of lease. Now the next thing is legal aspects of lease. Now the leaser or lessor has duty to deliver asset to lessee, that he will deliver the asset to lessee, because when he will deliver, the lessee can use it. Authorize lessee to use an asset. Now he will give authorization to the lessee that you can use this asset. And lease an asset in a peaceful position. In a peaceful position means in good condition. It is in good working condition. There is no fault in that asset. So these are the duties of the lessor. These are the duties of the lessor. Now the duties of the lessee. The lessee has duty to pay the lease rental periodically, that he will pay the lease rentals, means the rent payment of the lease periodically. Take reasonable care of an asset. He will take care of asset. Like some people, when they take the asset of someone else, then they are using it roughly. He will not use it roughly. Return the leased asset, and when the lease time period is complete, he will return this asset to the lessor. Types of lease. There are two types of lease. One is called operating lease, and the second one, it is called capital lease or financial lease. Now what is operating lease? A lease in which all risks and rewards related to asset ownership remain with the lessor. For the leased asset is called operating lease. In this lease, the asset is returned by the lessee after using it for lease term agreed upon. Lessee enjoys a cancellation option. Keep in mind, in this type of lease, all the risks and rewards of the leased asset, it will remain with the lessor. What does risk and reward here mean? Risks and reward. Risk and reward means if something happens to the asset, lessor will be responsible. Earthquake, flood, anything else. And maintenance, it will be the responsibility of the lessor. So all the risk and rewards related to the ownership of asset, it will belong to the lessor. The next thing, in this lease, the asset is returned Suppose there was a lease time period of 5 years for a piece of land. So after 5 years, ownership will again be transferred to the lessor. Our asset will be returned to the lessor, not ownership. Ownership is already with lessor. So the asset will be returned to the lessor. This is another feature of this type of lease. In this type of lease, the asset is returned by the lessee after using is for lease period agreed upon. Lessee enjoys a cancellation option. The third option, it is lessee. Lessee can cancel the agreement at any time. If lessee wants, he can cancel the contract, the lease contract. Lessor have no cancellation option. Cancellation option is with lessee. So this is the third feature of this type of lease. Now, ownership of asset remains with the lessor for the entire period of lease. Ownership is with the lessor for the entire period. But lessee can use this asset, this piece of land, for these 5 years. Accounting treatment. Operating lease is treated generally like renting. It is just like rent. That means the lease payments are treated as operating expenses at the asset, as the asset does not show on the balance sheet, and the asset does not show on the balance sheet. Keep in mind, he will show it in the balance sheet, the lessor, but the lessee, he can't show this asset in his balance sheet. Why? This asset is not his asset. He is just using it. And the rents that he is paying, this rent will be operating expense. Operating expense for the lessee. So this is the accounting treatment, that this asset will not be shown in the balance sheet of the lessee, and the rental payments that he is paying to the lessor, it will be treated as operating expenses. The next thing is purchase option. In operating lease, the lessee does not have any option to buy the asset during the lease period. During the lease period, lessee don't have an option to purchase the asset. This is another feature of this type of lease. Lease term. Lease term extends to less than 75% of the projected useful life of the lease asset. Suppose if there is a machine and the useful life of that machine, it is 100 years. So you can lease this asset for 75 years. That is 75% of the projected useful life of the leased asset, not more than 75%. Expenses borne. Lessee pays only the monthly lease payment in operating lease. Lessee will only pay the monthly rental payment. The maintenance expenses, it will be paid by the lessor, by the owner. Running cost. In operating lease, no running or administration costs are to be borne. For example, registration, repairs, etc., since it gives only right to use the asset. Now, in lease, there is no registration cost or there is no repair cost on the lessee. Who will bear these costs? The lessor will bear these costs. So this is another feature of the operating lease. that running cost, administration cost, it will be borne by the lessor. Here's an example. Let's assume company XYZ need a wet-get machine for its factory. The wet-get machine costs $1 million to buy. But company XYZ could also lease the wet-get machine for $2,000 a month instead. If they will purchase the machine for $1 million, so it is a huge amount of cash flow. So what they did, they use another option, $2,000 monthly, and they will lease it. This certainly could preserve a considerable amount of cash for the company. So a lot of cash will be saved and the company can invest this money somewhere else. If the company XYZ enter into an operating lease for the asset, it also will not assume any of the risk of ownership by leasing the machine rather than buying it. Now, if they will lease it, it will be beneficial for them. However, it will have to record all of the lease payments on its income statement. And when they will make lease payments, that will be recorded in the income statement, thereby reducing its net income. Rather that placing the asset on its balance sheet, but they can't place it in the balance sheet, and recognizing only depreciation on the income statement. But if they will purchase that asset, it will come into the balance sheet and they will charge only the depreciation expense in the income statement. Then there will be no rental expenses. So there will be only depreciation expenses. The next type of lease, it is called capital lease or financial lease. In financial lease, also known as capital lease, the risks and rewards related to ownership of asset leased are transferred to the lessee. All the risks and rewards of the ownership of assets, it will be transferred to the lessee. Generally, financial or capital lease cannot be cancelled. It cannot be cancelled. Neither lessor, neither lessee nor lessee can cancel the contract. Now, what is basically this? Just like I gave you the example of car. Again, old model. This is car. Bank. This is customer. Now, this customer, he selects this car. The value of this car, it is $15,000. But he is not making payment himself. Who is making payment? Bank is making payment. Bank is adding his interest, 1,500. So it will become 16,500. Bank will give the key of the car to the customer, but will keep the ownership documents. Now this man, he will make monthly payments of $300 to this bank. He will use the car So ownership is with him. He will use the car. All the risks and rewards, he's using it. If there is an accident, a risk, so he will be responsible. If there is any benefit, he's using it as a taxi car. So he is generating monthly 50,000 Afghanis. So it's rewards, it belongs to the customer. So this is the difference. In the previous one, ownership is not transferred, but here ownership is transferred. Risk and rewards are transferred. He will be responsible for maintenance. He will be responsible for anything happen to the car. So all the risks and rewards related to ownership of asset leased are transferred to the lessee. Generally, financial or capital lease cannot be cancelled, and it cannot be cancelled. You can't cancel the financial or capital lease. Ownership transfer option at the end of the lease period is there with the lessee. Title might or might not be transferred eventually. Now here, title will not be transferred, ownership, at that time. But at the end of lease, this title will also be transferred to the customer. Ranges from 3 to 50 years and even more than that. It is from 3 to 50 years. For car financing, it is less. Home financing, it is more. So this is what the capital lease. Inshallah, in the next class, then we will discuss about the accounting treatment, the purchase option, lease term, expenses borne, running cost, and each and everything about this. Inshallah, we will discuss this in the next class, and there are different other types of lease like net lease, full service lease, sale and lease back, leverage lease. All these inshallah we will discuss it in the next class. Assalamu alaikum.